Before the world was made, before the dust of the earth was breathed into promise, there was the song, an unbroken harmony of light, vibrating through realms untouched by time. But even in the heights, a shadow can learn to dream. This is the story of the first division, the night that visited heaven before it ever touched earth. I remember the silence after the war. Not the silence of peace, not the silence of worship. It was the silence that comes when heaven itself has been wounded. The plain beneath me was dim with fading light. Feathers drifted through the air, still smoldering from the force of our rebellion-born battle. The ground was cracked with broken radiance, and the air still carried the scent of thunder spent in judgment. I knelt among the fallen and pressed my hand against the fractured light beneath me, as though my palm could hold heaven together. I begged the heavens not to break because we had bled. Near me, one of the fallen still clung to the last embers of his former glory. He was not yet the horror he would become. He was still beautiful enough for grief, still holy enough for memory, but broken by the pride that had crowned him. He wondered what light becomes when it forgets the one who gave it, and I knew the answer. It becomes pride, and pride devours what it crowns. Then mercy finished what war had begun. The last fragment of resistance faded. Light rose back toward the heights. I felt grief tear through me with such force that it became a roar. Not rage, not victory. Worship, wounded and unbroken. I rose from the shattered plain with my wings blazing, and my cry shook the heavens. That cry became legend. But the legend did not begin there. It began before the first sword was drawn. Before battle, there was music. Before the shaking, before the fracture, before the fall, heaven breathed in harmony. Every angel had a place, every voice had a purpose, every movement answered the will of the one who made us. We were not merely singing to God, we were alive inside his order. Among all the voices, one rose brighter than the rest. Helel, the morning one. His beauty was not borrowed from shadow then. His light was not yet twisted. When he laughed, galaxies seemed to bend into rhythm. When he sang, lesser lights trembled with wonder. I loved him as one loves a brother in the service of the throne. But even then, something small began to move beneath his brilliance. It did not arrive as thunder. It did not announce itself as evil. It came softly, almost tenderly, like a single note leaning away from the song. He began to wonder whether we could rise beyond the name. I answered what every faithful spirit knew. The melody was the name. But Helel heard limitation where there was glory, and in that moment, silence changed. The silence that had once made room for worship became a womb for doubt. Heaven kept singing, but the perfect chord had already cracked. The matter came before the hall of radiance. I still remember how clear the chamber was, like glass made holy by obedience. The elders gathered in order, their faces steady, their wings folded beneath the weight of judgment. Helel stood before them with light too sharp to bear. Azurael, ancient and grave, called him to account. The question was not whether Helel had beauty. We all knew he did. The question was whether beauty had begun to worship itself. Helel did not stand like one who had refused his place. He stood like one who believed his place had become too small for him. He called rebellion a higher resonance. He called pride continuation. He called distance from the throne ascent. I stood near him and felt grief before the war had even begun. Then the air changed. Every atom listened. The unseen voice filled existence. The one who was and is and needs no permission to be declared himself. The hall bent beneath the weight of divine being. Wings collapsed, thrones bowed, the host fell in reverence. All heaven kneeled. Helel bowed too, but only his body obeyed. His heart remained standing, and for the first time, heaven felt division pass through it, like a blade. Night visited heaven before it ever touched earth. Not true night, for darkness had no throne there, but something like night moved beneath the sea of glass, where reflections could flatter what truth would correct. That was where Helel gathered the curious. They did not come as monsters. That would be too easy to resist. They came as beautiful beings, asking dangerous questions. The mirror beneath them did not show them as they were. It showed them adored. It showed sparks, imagining themselves as suns. Helel taught them to mistake the fire within them for ownership. He made them believe that because the name had given them light, the light now belonged to them. I watched from afar. I saw him draw a line across the glass. The mirror cracked, and with it, innocence cracked too. What he offered did not look like rebellion at first. It looked like freedom. That was the danger. Rebellion rarely begins ugly. It begins beautiful enough to be believed. Then the tremor came. The vault of heaven shook. Choirs became ranks. Hymns hardened into war cries. Those who remained faithful formed under order. Their armor shone, not with ambition, but with obedience. Their eyes were steady, though many of them were grieving. Across the plain, Helel descended like a falling star, still beautiful, still terrible, still convinced that the throne owed him an answer, but he had mistaken divine patience for absence. Then light drew swords against light. There was no blood as mortals know it, no flesh torn open, no earthly ruin, but glory broke, radiance shattered, constellations flared and died in the violence of our collision. Wings struck wings, songs became force, weapons of light crossed in the heights. I cried out for the name that made us, for the love that bends but never breaks, and the faithful surged with me. Then Helel came to meet me in the heart of chaos. His offer was not only power, it was rank, nearness, dominion beneath a stolen crown. But I knew what he could not yet admit. A crown built by pride eats the one who wears it. So we struck, and heaven shook beneath the sound of truth defending itself. At last, the plain lay shattered. Helel and I faced each other amid the ruin of what had once been perfect harmony. He wanted me to believe we were the same light, but sameness was not the question. The question was surrender. I pleaded with him in the only way left to me. I asked him to become what I could not become for him, repentant. But pride had already locked its hands around his heart. So the sword of dawn moved. It did not pierce flesh, it pierced song. The geometry of his glory fractured. The music around him collapsed inward. His brilliance, once morning, folded into shadow. Then the voice spoke again, calm, final, enough. The storm ceased. Every blade halted. Every wing froze, every sound surrendered. A gulf opened beneath Helel, black as forgotten memory. He looked once toward me, and in that look, grief and pride were bound together. Then he fell, and with him a third of heaven fell behind him. Streams of broken radiance dragged downward into exile. They did not yet look like the darkness they would become, but their descent had already begun. I stood alone when it ended. Victory did not feel like triumph. It felt like exile. I asked only that mercy remain. Heaven answered with silence. Then the roar came through me again, vast, holy, unbroken. It rolled through the realms until even the stars learned to tremble. Love had learned the cost of obedience. The wound in heaven did not close at once. It glowed faintly, healing slowly, like a scar across eternity. Through it, I saw a small blue world forming in the deep. Oceans moved before they had names. Mountains rose beneath the breath of promise. Life waited, still hidden, still unspoken, still held in the mind of God. Gabriel stood with me and wondered whether the beings to come would endure what freedom would ask of them. I could not answer with certainty. I only knew that mercy would be their hope. The voice moved across the waters. Dust waited to become promise. Another dawn began, another chance. I sheathed my sword and watched sunlight touch the newborn sea. Every fall must teach a rise. So I gave the world the only charge I could: carry the light. And before the first command thundered over the waters, heaven held its breath. The legend continued. If this story stirred your spirit, then do not let the light stop with you. Share it with someone who loves scripture, mystery, and sacred imagination. Subscribe to Books of METSHAF, hit the like button, and turn on all notifications, so you never miss a moment of cinematic biblical storytelling, where the ancient scriptures are honored with reverence, wonder, and holy imagination. May every story lead us back to the glory of God, and may every light remember the one who gave it.